The candidate filing window for the 2026 primary officially closed at noon today, March 30th, as I record this. And the results of who is running are a massive departure from what we've seen in Greenville County for the last 30 years. Do you actually have a choice on your ballot this November? Or was the winner decided the moment that a candidate filed because no one is running against them? I'm Katy Smith with Greater Good Greenville, and on this episode of Simple Civics Greenville County, our producer Nathaniel DeSantis and I are unpacking who's running in 2026. We will look at the surprising surge in competition for our state house seats, the local offices that remain primary-only contests, and the crowded races that are almost certain to head to a June runoff. Whether you are a political junkie or just want to know who is asking for your vote, we are here to help you navigate this newly colorful landscape. Get informed, get your calendar out, and let's see who's on the ballot.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Simple Civics. I am Nathaniel, and I'm here with Katy. And the 2026 filing for the primaries is officially closed today, as we're recording this at noon, March 30th. And the list for these statewide primaries is final. Katy, I understand you were at the Election Commission office when filing closed.
I was. I have often referred on this podcast to people coming in at the last minute to file once they see who else has filed. And I was curious to see what it looked like. And indeed, a couple people did roll in that last hour of filing. And I was able to go and look at the window and see who was running. And honestly, it took me back to being a kid at a restaurant back in the day.
Waiting for a table.
Sort of. Okay. So Nathaniel, as a Gen Xer, I'm wondering if you remember this too, as someone younger. I remember this very specific restaurant experience when I'd get my paper placemat or kids menu that had the maze and the word search. And sometimes they would hand you that little box of like 3 or 4 crayons. Do you remember that? Did you
Oh,
experience
yeah. I got
that?
the crayons. Got the crayons all the time. Red, blue, yellow, green, all of them. Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes you were lucky to get the green. Sometimes they made you work only with primary colors to make your own green. This was before the iPad days, but we had very limited options back then. Like it was hard to even make a sunset. You could make lots of red balloons if you wanted. For the last 30 years, that is a lot like what Greenville elections have felt like. We've been coloring in our democracy with that teeny tiny box of crayons. And oftentimes we had only one color in the box.
But today, with the results that I'm seeing on all the spreadsheets you've shared with me, it feels like we got the full 32 box of crayons here in Greenville County.
Yes, we're not yet to the 64 crayon box with the fancy sharpener on the back, but we have gone from very limited choice to a more high definition multicolor ballot. But before we get into the colors available this year, we should probably remind everyone on how this box of crayons primary actually works. We did a whole episode on this earlier this year that we can put in the show notes. But let's just remind everyone how we get from filing today to the winner in November. So the general election is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2026. But the semifinals, you could say, happen a lot sooner. On Tuesday, June 9th, we hold our statewide primary. And this is when parties choose who will be on the ballot for all the voters to choose from in November. So in South Carolina, a candidate must win more than 50% of that vote during the primary to avoid a runoff 2 weeks later on June 23rd. This is going to be especially critical this year because, just for governor, we have 7 Republicans and 3 Democrats who filed. And so a runoff is almost a certainty in those parties. November features the final face-off between the parties. So like the GOP candidate that goes forward, the Democratic candidate that goes forward, the third parties like United Citizens or Libertarians. June is when you choose which specific individual gets to carry that party's flag on your ballot. And remember, as we always tell you, in South Carolina, we have open primaries, which means you don't register as a Republican or a Democrat. You simply show up on primary day in June and you choose which party's ballot you wish to vote. So that's a little bit of the backstory. Primaries are very important.
So sticking with the crayon analogy, let's talk about those 4-pack crayon years. You've been looking at the data back to 1996, the year I was born. Yay. What was the standard color palette for Greenville?
It was very monochromatic. Since the late 90s, the red crayon, which we can say is the Republican crayon, has dominated here. In a typical cycle, roughly 70 to 80% of our state house seats were uncontested in the general election. So that means you'd go to the poll in November, you'd look at your ballot for state representative, and there would be only one name and no choice. There might have been a choice in the primary, but not in the general.
Right. And if you lived in a district where you didn't align with one candidate, you just didn't color.
Well, you essentially had a blank space on your map, and this was especially true for county offices. So since 1996, positions like sheriff, auditor, treasurer have been almost exclusively decided in the Republican primary. If you didn't vote in the Republican primary in June, you had really zero say in who ran those offices. You would come in November and just see that name on the ballot with the possibility of a write-in candidate. There are some districts in which that was true for the Democratic Party, for sure. And that's true this time around. For the most part, it's been a more Republican predominated election.
But today, again, based off the spreadsheets you shared with me already, it feels different. So you've crunched the numbers for the 32 races touching Greenville this year, which is insane. So what does that big box of crayons look like?
It is very vibrant. For the first time in my memory, we are seeing a massive surge in candidates from different parties raising their hands to serve. So this year, 72% of our races in Greenville County are competitive in the general election. That's 23 out of those 32 races where you will have a choice between at least two parties when you go to vote in November. That is a really big deal because that has not been the case since you and I've been doing the podcast and not in recent history. And only 15% of the races are truly one name only ballots, which means whoever filed to run for their seat is the only person who filed on either the Republican or the Democratic side. So they're essentially already winners.
So then let's look at the state house specifically. We've done 2 rounds of interview for the state house seats, and we generally find that that one doesn't have the most competition. Is that looking the same this year?
It's very different this year. And it is pretty wild to think both in 2022 and 2024, we extended interviews to all candidates in the primary and the general. And we did find those to be mostly competitive in the primary with no one filing against them in the general on both the Republican and the Democratic side. This time around, though, of the 16 House districts in our area, 14 will be contested in November. So not only do we have a lot of folks to interview for the primary in those partisan races, it'll happen again in November, which is really exciting.
And what about the opposite? Any places where there wasn't much competition at all?
Yeah, for sure. So District 23, for instance, for the House, only has one person who filed. That's Representative Chandra Dillard, who will keep her seat. And District 25 is a Democratic primary only race with incumbent Wendell Jones facing Derek Quarles. But everywhere else, we have a lot of interesting things happening.
Let's talk about runoffs. A moment ago, you mentioned that a candidate must win more than 50% of the vote to avoid a runoff. So, looking at that list with that 50% rule in mind, where might we maybe expect to have some runoffs?
So, this is where voters really need to pay attention because more choice does mean a higher chance of having to vote twice in June. So, the governor's race, as we mentioned, that is the big one. On the Republican side, there are 7 candidates. 7 candidates. On the Democratic side, there are 3. With that many people sharing the vote, whether you vote Republican or Democratic, it's almost certain we will have a runoff for both parties. The same numbers are true for the U.S. Senate race for the seat currently held by Senator Lindsey Graham. There are 7 Republican candidates who have filed, including Senator Graham, and there are 3 Democratic candidates. So again, very likely to head to a runoff. And this has enormous national implications that the typically small number of primary runoff voters could decide. So y'all, it is important. The Attorney General's race, the Republican primary, has 3 candidates. And right here in Greenville County in District 17, which is northern Greenville County, this is the local hotspot. 4 Republicans have filed to run for county council and 0 Democrats. And because there is no Democrat, the winner of this primary is the next county council member, which has been the more typical experience in Greenville County. So with 4 people running, the top 2 will almost certainly head to a runoff.
To emphasize that, if you live in Council District 17, you are more or less picking your representative in June, but you'll probably have to do it over 2 different Tuesdays.
Yes, and I think it was in the 2024 election, we did an episode about runoffs, so we can put that in the show notes too, but this is what I really wanna make sure everyone understands with runoffs, that too many people are like, "That I'm even voting in the primary is a big deal. That's already extra credit. I don't need to do that much and do the most and go do the runoff." But that to me is like going to a football game, you've battled the traffic, you made your tailgate, and you left once it goes to overtime. Like, that's when the magic happens. So everyone, please mark your calendars for June 23rd and assume that you are going to be voting in a runoff because there's some exciting races ahead.
So we're seeing a lot of competition, but where are we seeing a lack of competition?
Yeah, on the county's administrative side, there isn't competition. One person filed to run, and it was the incumbents. So, these are down ballot races that people don't always associate with policy, even though they're important. They handle your money, your legal records. So, for these four countywide positions, auditor, treasurer, probate judge, and solicitor, the incumbents who hold them filed to run, and no one is running against them. So, you won't be voting in those cases. But otherwise, lots of choices in both the primary and the general election.
You have looked at the data from 1996 all the way to 2026. What's the takeaway?
Well, my takeaway is that having choices requires homework. Always you have to be an informed voter. But back in the day when you only had like one or two people to choose from, you didn't have to think too much about that big picture. But now with 14 contested House seats and a 7-way primary for governor, you've got to use the sharpener on the back of the box, which I guess the 32 count crayon box doesn't have. Do they even make 32 count anymore? I don't even know. But regardless, sharpen your understanding of these candidates. And at Simple Civics, we always say, we don't care which color crayon you pick. We do not care who you vote for. We just want you to vote and get involved. And we love that, here, I'm going to kill this metaphor. We love that the picture of Greenville's future is getting colored in with more detail. We love seeing people raise their hands to serve. That makes me so excited. But remember that still 15 to 20% of these races, including some key county council seats, will be decided only in June. So no matter how you slice it, no matter where you live and who's running where you live, if you don't show up for the primary, you're letting someone else make choices for you. So plan to vote in June or early voting post Memorial Day, and then vote again in the runoff, and then vote again in November.
And to help you do your homework, we will be interviewing tons of candidates. I think we have a list of 26 we're already reaching out to. They will come on the podcast, hopefully come on the podcast, and talk for 10 minutes, get their whole thing out there so you can listen to it and make an informed decision on who you're going to vote for, and makes the homework a little bit easier for you so that you can just keep on listening to the podcast and get it all right here.
And Nathaniel, I am so excited that you're going to have available a candidate lookup tool for folks again, which has been an enormous resource in previous years, where people can easily go find who they could vote for, listen to their podcast episode, check out their social media and candidate website, and make it so much easier to understand and be an educated voter.
That's right. That'll be out by Memorial Day, and we'll keep everyone posted on when that's ready to go. And again, as Katy mentioned, you'll be able to see everyone there, listen to their episodes, and do your homework. So thanks everyone for listening. Katy, thank you for doing all of this research for all of us and helping us understand this in a very easy to understand way with your crayon analogy. I thought that was perfect. And any final closing thoughts from you?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who filed and is raising their hands to serve or to continue to serve. You guys are what makes our country great.
Hi, Simple Civics Greenville County listeners, Nathaniel here. If you've made it this far, then we think you'll really love our newsletter. Sign up for bonus content, updates, and more right in your inbox. Look for the link in the description that says newsletter to sign up, or visit us at simpleCivicsGreenvilleCounty.org. Find the link in the menu that says newsletter and sign up there. We'll see you again next week.